Chapter 28. Ruh-roh, Zoe said. The griffin whisperer has lost his mind. She climbed onto the hail bay beside Blue and leaned back against the wall. It was ridiculous how tired she was. She was too tired even to make fun of Logan's goofy theory properly. Wait, I'm serious, Logan said. Can't hear the cubs, so you don't realize how they are with her and how tiring it must be. It's like nonstop insanity in there. And she's doing 90% of the work, even when Riff thinks he's helping. Probably more when Riff thinks he's helping. What if she let them out because she needed a break? But the cubs would have seen her do that, wouldn't they? Blue said. Maybe she hopped out of the enclosure while they were asleep, unbolted the door, and then waited for them to find it themselves, Logan suggested. She and Riff can fly in and out, right? Sure, Blue said. The fence is just for the cubs. Or it's supposed to be. That's why we moved them in there. So we kicked the hail bay with her sneakers. Nira has been tired and irritable lately, she said, but what kind of mom would risk her own cubs like that? Logan turned away and ran the comb through Cleopatra's mane. Maybe she expected them to stay inside the menagerie. Or maybe not. Some people aren't meant to be moms, he said quietly. Logan, Zoe started. Hey, I know, Blue interrupted, sitting up suddenly. We can find out if it was Nira. He turned to Zoe. The security tapes. So, readers, are you as confused as I am by this part? I mean, it did seem that Nira was getting very short with the cubs when they were all on top of her and playing with her. And I'm sure even your own mothers at home are getting, tired of taking care of kids all day. But Zoe picks up a really good point. Would anybody actually risk her cubs like that? And why is Logan the one that's saying some people aren't meant to be moms? Think about his own mom. Logan, Zoe started. Hey, I know, Blue interrupted, sitting up suddenly. We can find out if it was Nira. He turned to Zoe. The security tapes. There are security tapes? Logan ducked under Cleopatra's neck and gave them a wry look. That wouldn't have been helpful to check sooner. No, Zoe said. The cameras are on the inside of the enclosure. There's no shot of the front of the gate from the outside. But you're right. We could see what Nira was doing all night. Let's do it, Logan said. He stepped out of Cleopatra's stall and bowed. May we be excused, Cleopatra? She tossed her mane. I suppose. The three of them ran back up toward the house. Zoe pulled open the sliding door and led the way into Melissa's office, off the living room. Blue's class picture from 6th grade hung in a silver frame above her desk. Otherwise, the room was all straight edges, clear surfaces, and black and white colors. Melissa's to-do list for the day was printed out, with half the items in bold and laid neatly next to her desktop computer. So we glanced at it and noticed enviously that nearly all the boxes had check marks in them. Zoe had gotten her to-do list strategy from watching Melissa, but she still felt overwhelmed and disorganized practically all the time. One corner of the room was set up with the security camera video feeds and archives. So we sat down and pulled up the week's videos from the Griffin enclosure. There are the Snappa agents, she said, fast-forwarding through Sunday. The two agents zipped around the enclosure like wind-up cars. Logan leaned over her shoulder, frowning at the screen. Wait, he said. Pause it for a minute. He stared at the Snappa agents and then shook his head. Never mind. What? Blue asked. That guy seems familiar for some reason, Logan said, pointing to the male Snappa agent. But I can't figure out why. Zoe shifted uncomfortably and hit the fast-forward button again. Here's Thursday. There's me brushing all the cubs. She showed the video again and watched the smaller version of herself finish another Harry Potter chapter with Flurp. Then get up and pat all the cubs goodnight. After she left, all 6 cubs descended on Nira at once. Their mother had been napping under one of the trees, but 24 paws clambering onto her back woke her up pretty quickly. She tried to sit up, yawning and blinking, but 2 of the cubs knocked her over and started wrestling between her wings. The other 4 began a mad game of chase that seemed to involve tagging Nira's head or tail every 30 seconds. Wow, Blue said, watching the screen with his arms folded. That looks exhausting. See? Logan said. Poor Nira. He picked up Melissa's mug, a joke gift from Blue, which said, I'd rather have a cowboy than a fishman on the side, and started fidgeting with it. Zoe leaned her chest on her fist. How had she never noticed this before? Why had Logan spotted it in just 2 visits to the Griffin enclosure? To be fair, whenever Zoe went in, the cubs paid attention to her, looking for jelly beans mostly, so she'd never seen them all focused on Nira like this. Where is Riff? Logan asked. Blue pointed to a corner of the screen. The father griffin was flopped among the tree branches above the gamboling cubs. He was fast asleep. Man, when we get the last griffin back, we are having a family dynamic intervention, said Zoe. Talk to Clink, Logan suggested, pointing to the largest griffin cub, who was clearly herding the others into playing the games she wanted. If she learns to play with her dad and give her mom some peace, the others will follow. Zoe fast-forwarded slowly through the rest of the evening. Nira tried to give each of the cubs a bath and got thoroughly soaked herself. She tried to feed them dinner and had to break up 5 separate fights over who had the best or biggest piece of food. Well after dark, the cubs finally fell asleep one by one. The last one was Scorp, who spent at least 2 hours bouncing out of the den to bother Nira instead of going to sleep. At last, Nira stood outside the cave entrance, looking at the little cubs all snuggled together in a big fur pile. She waited 5 minutes until she was sure they were all asleep. Then she backed away slowly, as quietly as possible, and settled herself into a pile of dry leaves. With a sigh, she curled up and closed her eyes. A few moments later, Riff woke up, yawned, stretched, and jumped to the ground. Dirt billowed up in wisps around his paws as he landed. He blinked at his sleeping wife, then took a step toward the slumbering cubs. Immediately, Nira's eyes flew open and her beak snapped around his tail, yanking him back. Before he could yowl in protest, she shoved him to the ground and clamped her paws around his beak. Riff gave her an injured look, and when she let go, he slunk off grouchily. Nira watched him sternly for a minute. Finally, she went back to sleep. And that was it. They went forward slowly through the rest of the night. Nira slept like a log, and after puffing up his chest and pacing like a fierce guardian for an hour, so did Riff. At around 2 o'clock in the morning, Clink suddenly raised her head and swiveled it around toward the gate. Look, Zoe whispered. I bet she's hearing someone unlock it. So it's not Nira, Blue pointed out. I guess not, Logan agreed. And that means it wasn't Zoe's fault either. Zoe resisted the urge to hug him. There was a pause. Clink looked at her sleeping parents, then back at the gate. With a few sharp jabs of her beak, she woke her siblings. Her wings flapped and her paws gestured as if she was giving them a grand speech. Probably about all the treasure in the outside world, Zoe guessed. The cubs stumbled sleepily behind Clink to the gate, which swung open when she leaned against it. Then they followed her out, vanishing into the dark, one by one. Logan leaned over Zoe's shoulder again. Wait, he said. Go back. What's she doing? He pointed to the littlest griffin, the one who was still missing. She trailed at the back of the group. Zoe rewound a few frames and restarted the tape. As the other cubs followed Clink, the little griffin looked around furtively and then quickly dug a hole next to one of the boulders. She shoved something into it, scooped dirt back over it, and patted it down. Then she hurried after her siblings, none of whom had seen what she had done. What was that? Zoe whispered, half to herself. She brushed the screen with her fingertips. Were you hiding, little cub? It looks like she was trying to keep some treasure safe, Blue said, which means she planned to come back. Logan pointed out. He rolled the mug between his fingers. That's a good sign, right? I hope so, Zoe said. We have to find out what she buried. Maybe it's a clue. She rolled the chair away from the desk and stood. Seeing the Snappa agents on screen had brought all her anxiety rushing back. They had less than 24 hours before the agents returned, At noon tomorrow, the menagerie could be shut down. Worse than that, if they didn't find the last griffin, Snappa might decide to kill her. Where are you going? Zoe's mom called as they ran through the living room again. She was setting out plates on the table, which made Zoe want to scream. How could her parents stop for dinner? Why weren't they in a state of total panic? She had never seen the panic, not once in her entire life, but this seemed impossible not to. Following a hunch, Zoe called back, sliding the door shut behind them. Blue reached the griffin enclosure first and pulled the gate open as Zoe and Logan pelted up behind him. Scorp's head immediately popped up over his mother's wing. Zoe could guess what he was thinking, even without Logan's power to hear the cubs. Cow? Hi to you two, Logan said, grinning. The three of them crouched beside the boulder they had seen in the video. Within 10 seconds, all the griffin cubs, except Clink, had flocked to them, sitting on the boulder or poking their beaks between the boys' knees. They'd like to know what we're doing, Logan said. Wow, thanks, Zoe said, wrestling Clonk's nosy head out of the way. I could never have guessed that. Ow, Flirp, you are too big to sit on my shoulder anymore. The dark gray griffin cub snuggled under Zoe's arm instead. There was a patch of newly turned over earth where the littlest griffin had been digging. Logan started to brush it aside, and Scorp bounced down from the boulder, nearly skewering Logan's hand with his claws by accident. Okay, Logan said, sitting back. You can do it. Scorp scraped at the dirt, quickly digging a hole. He moved back a step as they all saw a flash of purple in the ground. No way! Zoe leaned forward and carefully fished out the buried object. It was crusted with dirt, but she recognized the pink, purple, and yellow threads underneath anyway, this was her friendship bracelet. Jasmine had made it for Zoe 2 years ago, and Zoe had never taken it off until they stopped being friends. Even then, Zoe had still worn it at home sometimes, where Jasmine couldn't see it. The bracelet had gone missing a few weeks ago. Zoe remembered wearing it on a day when she'd missed Jasmine more than usual, and then taking it off at the Griffin cub's bath time. The littlest cub must have nabbed it while Zoe was wrestling with one of the others. Zoe's hand went to her bare wrist, and a horrible sinking sensation flooded through her. Guys, she said, I think I know where the last griffin is. She took a deep breath and met Blue's eyes. I think she's gone to the Sterlings.